Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're not just tackling a topic, we're really digging into a skill, a foundational skill, actually, that impacts your professional life, your social life, pretty much every single day. We are getting into the language of planning, mastering the art of arrangement in English. Now, the sources we've looked at for this deep dive, they're incredibly practical. They don't just give you like lists of words. No, they really dissect the underlying structure, the necessary politeness, even the sort of psychological commitment you need to plan anything well. And that's whether you're coordinating some huge project across different time zones or, just trying to pin down a time for dinner with a friend. Think about it, the pressure's kind of on, right? If you schedule badly, you waste time, everyone's time. And if you cancel awkwardly, well, you can lose a bit of social capital, maybe even trust. This skill, it's almost like a direct measure of your competence. So here's the mission for you, our listener. We're aiming to go way beyond just basic dictionary definitions today. We want to extract the nuanced vocabulary, those specific expressions, and, this is crucial, the sort of mechanisms of polite structure you need, the goal. To sound authoritative, natural, and completely confident the next time you need to lock down a plan in English.
Yeah, and that focus on confidence, on the mechanism, that's absolutely key. Because when we talk about making arrangements, sure, the basic definition is planning or organizing something in advance, but the subtle ways we choose our words, the specific verb we pick, that sets the whole tone. It really does. I mean, the foundational language we see in the sources, it immediately separates just like a casual thought from a concrete plan. When you shift from saying, oh, I wonder if we can meet sometime, to something more direct, like let's arrange a meeting, or maybe can we fix a time for tomorrow? You're actually doing something quite significant there. You're initiating what's basically a binding contract, whether it's social or professional. You're signaling that, okay, effort is now required, and a commitment is definitely expected from both sides.
That's fascinating, that transition from just a possibility, an abstract idea, to tangible action. It really shows that the language of arrangement, it's inherently proactive, isn't it? You're making something happen. Okay, so let's unpack this. Where should we start? Maybe with the very first step, choosing the right verb. Because just sticking to plan or schedule all the time, well, you miss out on a whole layer of meaning, the emotional context, the professional nuance.
Yeah, our sources definitely show this kind of sliding scale of verbs. You've got book, plan, schedule, organize, even confirm. And the key insight seems to be that picking between these isn't just like personal style. It's dictated almost entirely by how formal the situation is and what your relationship is with the person you're talking to. It's all about calibrating your tone.
Exactly. Calibration is the perfect word. And formality. It isn't just about using longer words. It's about creating a certain linguistic distance, maybe, and setting really precise expectations. So let's break down that formal context first. Business settings, dealing with official organizations, maybe meeting new professional contacts. In these cases, we lean heavily on verbs like arrange, schedule, and confirm. And what's linguistically interesting here is that these words, they carry this implied sense of official commitment and also timeline management. Like when you use the word schedule, you're immediately bringing in the idea of calendars, organizational structures, the need to stick to that specific time block.
Right. It implies something serious, something recorded, an organizational step has been taken or will be. It's not just a casual suggestion you might forget about 5 minutes later. It suggests, some kind of external documentation is involved.
Precisely. Documentation, or at least a formal slotting into a system. The sources give us some really good, efficient phrases for business scheduling. Things like, can we arrange a meeting for Monday morning? Very direct. Or that really crucial phrase for building consensus. Let's fix a time that works for everyone. Notice how the language there is focused purely on, mutual practicality and efficiency. There's not much emotional padding, is there?
No, it's very functional. And speaking of efficiency, there's one phrase that comes up a lot. It's simple, but apparently often maybe misused or underused by non-native speakers. It's when you can't commit right away. I'll check my calendar and get back to you. Why is that specific phrase so much better than just shrugging and saying, I don't know yet?
Oh, it's a golden phrase. Absolutely golden, because it demonstrates professional self-management. It establishes logistical ownership. When you use that phrase, you're communicating two really critical things. One, you're showing respect for the other person's time by not committing to something you might have to break later. And two, you take ownership of the next step, the action item. The burden of following up is now clearly on you. You become the one responsible for closing that communication loop.
Okay. So if you just say, I don't know, it kind of leaves it hanging.
Exactly. If you just say, I don't know who follows up, the responsibility implicitly falls back on the other person to chase you, which is inefficient. And frankly, it can signal a bit of lack of respect for their agenda, their time. But by saying, I'll check my calendar and get back to you, you keep control of your own commitments while showing respect for theirs. It's subtle, but it's a really powerful act of professional responsibility.
Yeah, it turns that moment of uncertainty into a definite action item, but it's your action item.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the formal side. Now let's flip completely. Let's talk informal social contexts. Here, the stakes feel much lower, usually, and the language totally reflects that. It becomes much warmer, more focused on the shared experience, right? So here we use verbs that are more about maintaining the relationship. Meet up, hang out, or get together.
The goals are totally different, aren't they?
Yeah.
Social plans are usually aiming for connection, ease, enjoyment. So the terms we use are naturally relationship-focused. When you suggest something like, let's catch up over lunch, that verb catch up, it implies you have a shared past. And the intention is to exchange personal news, strengthen that bond. It's much richer emotionally than just saying, let's eat lunch together.
Right. It's about the interaction, not just the logistics.
Exactly. And the specific phrases we use with friends, they tend to be more open, more inviting.
Do you want to meet up this weekend? Hey, are you free tomorrow evening? Or making a suggestion, how about going out for dinner?
These often rely more on an implied sort of mutual agreement, a shared willingness, rather than strict calendar management.
I wonder, though, what about that blurry line? Like, when you text a colleague, but you're also friends outside of work, does that strict formal-informal distinction still hold up?
That is a brilliant point, because the medium texting, for example, in the existing relationship, definitely create a kind of gray area. If you're texting a colleague you also socialize with, you might find yourself using a more informal structure, like starting with hey, but you might still use a more formal verb if it's work-related. Oh, you might text, hey, can we schedule that follow-up chat for next Tuesday? The delivery feels casual because it's a text. It starts with, hey, but the verb schedule keeps it grounded in the professional context.
Okay, so the context of the arrangement itself still matters a lot.
Absolutely. The sources really emphasize that the key distinction, even in those gray areas, remains the focus. Is the language built around the event itself, the timeline, the agenda, the structure? That's formal. Or is it built around the relationship, the connection, the shared activity, the ease of it all? That's informal. And usually if the arrangement involves, say, company resources or has a direct professional consequence, the more formal verb tends to win out, even between friends.
Got it. So that verb choice, it's like our first dial to calibrate. It instantly tells the other person if we're treating this conversation as more of a transaction or more about the relationship. That's a really significant takeaway just from looking at the basic vocabulary. Okay, so we've maybe suggested a time, we've picked the right kind of verb, but the plan is still sort of floating around, isn't it? It's not locked in yet. Yeah. Now comes that crucial moment of commitment, and making that transition from negotiation to a firm plan. That needs its own special kind of language, confirmation language. Because without it, you leave room for ambiguity, and ambiguity is just, well, it's the enemy of efficient arrangements, isn't it?
It's absolutely deadly, especially in business. You're right. If a plan isn't explicitly confirmed, it's really not a plan at all. It's just a suggestion, still hanging there. So when we analyze this language of finality, we're looking at a shift in the linguistic approach. So it's a move away from tended language, hedging, like using modal verbs or softeners.
Like saying, would it be possible for us to perhaps meet on Thursday?
That kind of thing. Exactly, that kind of thing. Very soft, very hesitant. But when we move to confirm, the language has to become much more declarative, more concrete, solid. So first, let's talk about explicit confirmation. These are phrases that use really action-oriented verbs, and they're tied directly to logistics. Things like, okay, I've booked the table, or right, the meeting room is confirmed. The strength in these statements often comes from using the past tense booked, confirmed. It implies that a verifiable action, something external, has actually been taken. It changes the reality.
Ah, okay, so you've actually done something. You've maybe spent money, or you've reserved a resource that other people can't now use. You've moved the plan out of that abstract negotiation phase and into, like, physical reality. You might have a receipt or a calendar entry or a booking reference number.
Exactly. You've placed a real constraint on the world, however small.
Yeah.
Then the other side of this coin is more informal affirmation. We could maybe call it the all set language. This is where we see the confidence implied by lighter phrases like, okay, it's all set then, or great, we're good to go, or even just consider it done.
Right, more casual, but still signals completion.
Yes, in a formal context, these phrases suggest that all the necessary prerequisites have been met.
Yeah.
The calendar's been checked, the mental note has been made, the time definitely works for everyone involved. It's a lower stakes commitment than booking a flight, obviously, but it's still a solid agreement based on that mutual understanding.
Okay, let's see how this plays out. Because that final step, that confirmation action, seems really critical, especially in professional dialogue. There needs to be an artifact of the confirmation, almost. So in that professional scenario from our sources, it goes something like, employee asks for a meeting, the manager checks their schedule, they verbally agree on, say, Tuesday, and then comes that really crucial closing line. Okay, great. I'll send a calendar invite. Why is that digital step so vital?
It is the binding action in that context. Absolutely. That calendar invite, it's more than just a reminder. It functions as a shared digital artifact of the agreement. It usually requires the recipient to actively acknowledge it, accept, decline, maybe.
Right, you have to click something.
Exactly. It sort of soft binds the agreement technologically. It provides a single shared point of truth that exists in two separate digital spaces, your calendar and theirs. And importantly, it eliminates the possibility, or at least makes it much harder for either person to later claim they were confused about the time or the location or even the basic agenda if it's included.
Okay, so it locks it down digitally. Now, contrast that with the informal example, friends agreeing to grab a coffee. The closing there is much quicker, relies purely on verbal agreement, maybe some enthusiasm, sounds great, followed by, deal, I'll see you there.
Yeah, totally different vibe. The stakes are lower. The expectation that both people will remember and show up is based on the relationship itself, and the commitment feels purely social.
So the underlying lesson here seems to be that confirmation isn't just about saying yes.
No, it's not. It's about confirming the mechanism by which the plan is now considered fixed and, in a way, auditable. Are you using an external tool like a calendar invite or a booking reference? That's one mechanism. Or are you relying purely on the strength of the relationship and a verbal agreement like a friendly deal? That's another. Understanding which mechanism is in play and making sure both sides agree on it, that really determines how secure the arrangement actually is.
Right. So if there's one thing to remember from this part, it's probably make sure you know what the closing mechanism is. Is it digital? Is it just verbal? And make that explicit if you need to. Okay, now we get to the tricky part, where arrangement skills really become a test of maybe emotional intelligence. Because let's face it, plans change all the time. A conflict pops up, someone gets sick, priorities suddenly shift. And often the way we handle a cancellation or ask to reschedule, that can be more memorable, sometimes negatively, than the initial booking itself. So handling change politely, effectively, that's a critical skill.
It really is. This is where relationship capital, whether professional or social, is truly tested. Yeah. If you handle a cancellation badly, clumsily, you risk damaging your reputation as someone who's reliable, someone who communicates well. So we really need to focus on what our sources suggest are like, the 3 pillars of polite rescheduling. They're designed to minimize the hassle for the other person and keep trust intact. So pillar number 1, softening the blow. You have to introduce the bad news, the change, with some kind of statement that shows regret, that acknowledges you're causing disruption. This is where those opening phrases like, I'm afraid I'll have to reschedule, or look, I need to cancel our appointment for today, become really essential.
Let's pause on, I'm afraid. It feels gentler somehow than saying, I am sorry I have to reschedule. What makes I'm afraid work so well here?
That's a great observation. I'm afraid is a classic linguistic softener, or what linguists call a hedge. It signals reluctance, regret, but it does so without necessarily attaching personal blame or requiring a deep, formal apology right off the bat. Think about it. An apology saying, I'm sorry, often implies you did something wrong, you made a mistake.
Yeah, like it's your fault.
Right. Whereas I'm afraid simply signals that, unfortunately, a situation has come up, often external, that forces you to inconvenience the other person. It kind of lowers the potential for defensiveness or annoyance from the other side by framing the issue as an external difficulty, not necessarily an internal failure of your commitment. It takes the sting out right at the start.
That's a fantastic distinction. Okay, so you apologize for the inconvenience caused, but not necessarily for your inability to make it happen. Precisely. Okay, then we move to pillar 2, providing context. Giving a reason.
Now, socially, sometimes a vague, oh, something came up, might be okay between close friends, although even that can be annoying if it happens often. But in business or more formal settings, providing a reasonably clear, ideally non-negotiable reason is pretty crucial. Why? Because it maintains trust. If you cancel a professional meeting without giving any context at all, the other person might easily assume, maybe unfairly, that the meeting just wasn't a high priority for you. Or worse, that you simply forgot about it.
Right. Leaving it blank lets their imagination fill it in, possibly negatively.
Exactly. So for formal settings, the source material gives us some good, concrete, professional-sounding examples, reasons that sound pretty undeniable.
Unfortunately, I have another unavoidable commitment at that time, or maybe I realize I'll be out of town next week and I underestimated my travel window. These point to external logistical factors.
Okay, but what about less formal situations, maybe still professional, but where the reason is personal? What's the acceptable level of vagueness there? Is saying, I have a family emergency, okay? Or should you try to be a bit more specific? How much detail is needed? That's a delicate balance. The general rule of thumb, linguistically, seems to be specific enough to sound genuine and that it's a real issue, but vague enough to maintain your personal privacy.
So for personal reasons, something like, I'm afraid something urgent has come up that requires my immediate attention, often works quite well. It emphasizes the urgency, urgent, immediate, which justifies the cancellation, but it protects your boundaries. You're not obligated to share the details. The goal isn't really to overshare. It's just to confirm that the cancellation is driven by necessity, not by indifference or poor planning.
Okay, that makes sense. Necessity, not indifference. And finally, we arrive at pillar 3, which is maybe the most important one for maintaining goodwill. Offering solutions, the flexibility factor.
If you are the one causing the inconvenience by canceling or rescheduling, the obligation really falls on you to try and fix it, to make it right. This is probably the most polite and professional step you can take.
So this means you can't just cancel and say, let's reschedule sometime soon. That's not enough. You actually have to propose new, specific options yourself.
Precisely. That's the key difference. Phrases that clearly show you're taking the initiative to rearrange are paramount here.
Can we possibly meet later this week instead? Specifically, I could do Wednesday at 10 a.m., or would Friday morning work better for you?
See, by offering 2 or 3 concrete alternatives, you immediately take the scheduling burden back onto yourself. You're doing the work. And crucially, you signal that your intent to meet or to complete the planned activity is still there. It's only the timing that needs to change.
Right, you're reaffirming the value of the meeting or the arrangement.
Exactly. And the sources we looked at, they overwhelmingly stress this. Sounding cooperative and flexible is absolutely key to maintaining good relationships, especially in the corporate world. When you cancel gracefully, give a decent reason, and immediately offer alternatives, you actually solidify your reputation. You come across as respectful, reliable, and proactively cooperative, even though you just canceled.
That's a neat trick. It turns a potentially negative interaction, the cancellation, into a positive reflection of your professionalism and consideration. That's a really useful pivot to be able to make.
Okay, so far we focus a lot on scheduling time, managing calendars. But arrangements, obviously, often involve much heavier logistics. Things like booking trips, organizing big events like conferences or even parties, securing physical resources externally. How does the language of arrangement shift when the stakes move from just managing a calendar slot to managing actual physical goods, services, locations? Yeah, the vocabulary changes quite dramatically then. We tend to move away from the more general scheduling verbs we discussed earlier, and we move towards more specific, often transactional and administrative actions. We're definitely entering the realm of logistics-heavy arrangements, and travel is a prime example. The verbs become much more functional, more concrete. Book, like a flight. Reserve, like a hotel room or a rental car. Confirm a reservation. Arrange the airport pickup. Finalize the itinerary.
It sounds like each verb corresponds to a very specific step in a chain.
Exactly. What's crucial here is that each of these verbs signifies a pretty unique step in the whole logistical matrix. They're not really interchangeable. For instance, you might book the flight, that's the purchase action, but then you might still need to confirm the reservation later, that's a verification action. And only once all the pieces are in place can you really finalize the itinerary, that's the integration action, putting it all together coherently.
So it seems like travel arrangements demand much greater precision in the language you use about completion. You really can't afford ambiguity when physical resources, money, and tight schedules are involved.
Absolutely not. Ambiguity there could be disastrous. A statement like, okay, I've booked the flight and the hotel is strong because it focuses on tangible, often paid-for services that are constrained by external reality. But the language also extends into more idiomatic phrases that help convey the status of ongoing, complex coordination.
Like what kind of idioms?
Well, for example, people often talk about ironing out the final details. That That means dealing with all the small but potentially crucial points or discrepancies in a plan. Or you might hear someone say they need to get all their ducks in a row. This means making sure every single part of a complex logistical chain is ready, confirmed, and sequenced correctly before things kick off. These kinds of idioms are pretty common in high-stakes planning because they convey that sense of complexity and the need for meticulous checking quite efficiently.
That makes sense. And what about the language needed when you have to delegate parts of these bigger arrangements? Say I'm arranging a work trip, but I need to ask my assistant, for example, to arrange the airport pickup. How is the language different from just scheduling a meeting with them?
Good question. It often requires specific prepositions or phrasing that clearly denote ownership and responsibility. So instead of just scheduling with someone, you might be making someone in charge of a task or responsible for completing a specific part. You might say something like, "Could you please arrange the airport transfer using the corporate account?" Or maybe more formally, you are tasked with finalizing the visa application paperwork.
Okay, so you're assigning responsibility.
Yes, the language focuses much more explicitly on defining roles, responsibilities, and boundaries, because unlike scheduling a single meeting between two people, large logistical operations involve many moving parts. And these parts often have to be delegated successfully to different people or teams to get the whole thing done. Clarity on who owns what is essential.
That actually leads us perfectly into thinking about social and organizational arrangements too. Things like planning parties, maybe even weddings, which are essentially, when you think about it, small-scale corporate events, but maybe with better music and less PowerPoint. In these contexts, the language of arrangement seems completely centered on shared responsibility, delegation, tracking progress.
Absolutely. For planning events, the language has to explicitly define who is responsible for which piece of the overall logistical puzzle. So we use phrases like, okay, so we are organizing the party together, setting the collective frame. Then you break it down. Mark has arranged the catering, that's a completed action by him, and maybe Sarah is in charge of decorations. Did you notice the shift in verb structure there again?
How so?
Well, if you say, I arranged the catering, you're reporting a specific action you took and completed. But if you say, I'm in charge of decorations, you're declaring an ongoing state of responsibility for a whole category of tasks related to decorations. It's a continuous role, not a single action.
I see. One is done, the other is an ongoing responsibility. That's subtle but important for coordination. And what about communicating the arrangements to the people attending the event? That seems like another critical step in event planning language.
Yes, that's communicating the output of all the internal planning. So the language shifts again. Here we use specific phrases focused on information dissemination and response collection, like just letting everyone know we have sent out all the invitations, or setting deadlines. Please note the RSVP day is firm. We need numbers by Friday. This language isn't about the initial booking or organizing anymore. It's about managing the flow of information outwards and then managing the data that comes back like RSVPs. Because that incoming data is often necessary for the next logistical step, like giving final catering numbers to Mark, who arranged it.
It's a cycle of arrange, communicate, collect response, then maybe arrange again based on the response.
Precisely. So if we try to synthesize everything we've covered today, it seems that whether you're dealing with a straightforward business meeting, a casual coffee catch-up, or a complex multi-country travel itinerary, effective arrangement always depends on two things. Careful planning, yes, but also absolutely uncompromising clarity and communication. The more precise you are with your verb choice, the clearer your confirmations are, the less ambiguity there is, the smoother everything will go when it's time to actually execute the plan. You could almost say that precision in arrangement language is simply efficiency translated into words.
That's a great way to put it. Clarity really is the common thread, isn't it? We started with just picking the right verb for the formality, and we ended up talking about defining specific roles in complex event logistics. And in every single case, specificity and clarity were the ultimate measures of success. #outro. Wow, this has been a really intense deep dive. We've kind of mapped the language of arrangement all the way from a quick text message to figuring out a formal travel itinerary. So let's just quickly recap the main points on the navigational map we built today. First, we pulled apart the essential vocabulary. We looked at how those formal scheduling verbs arrange, schedule tend to create a bit of professional distance, while the informal socializing verbs meet up, hang out, work to build or maintain relationship proximity.
The verb choice sets the stage.
Second, we focused on mastering the language of confirmation. emphasizing that you really need that final unambiguous action or statement to lock things down, whether that's the hard lock of a calendar invite in a business context or just the simple social contract of a deal between friends. Make it clear it's confirmed.
Right. No ambiguity allowed at that stage. Third, we spent a good chunk of time on maybe the most delicate skill, how to handle changes and cancellations with grace and professionalism. We explored those 3 pillars. Softening the blow first, maybe using phrases like, "I'm afraid," then providing necessary context or reason.
And crucially, offering concrete alternatives yourself to show you're flexible and cooperative.
Taking ownership of the solution, yeah.
And finally, we looked at specializing the language for those bigger, large-scale logistics, travel, and events. We saw how the vocabulary shifts towards verbs about securing tangible resources and using specific prepositions when you need to delegate responsibility clearly. So the encouragement for you listening is maybe try to consciously apply some of these this week, even just using, "I'll check my calendar and get back to you," instead of, "I don't know, see how it feels."
Definitely. And maybe as a final insight, just to wrap things up, we really want to reiterate that core principle running through all of this. When you're making arrangements, the key qualities to aim for in your communication are always be polite, be relentlessly clear, and try to demonstrate flexibility whenever possible.
Polite, clear, and flexible. Got it.
And maybe let's consider the slightly broader implication here for a second. The clarity and the flexibility you use in your language around arrangements. It isn't just about scheduling efficiently. It really acts as a direct measure, almost a proxy, for your professional respect and your social competence. Think about it. When you communicate precisely and confirm clearly, you save other people time, mental energy, and potential confusion. In today's fast-paced world, that is a fundamental form of respect.
That's a powerful thought. Clarity is respect. So here's a little challenge for you to notice this week. Pay attention to how different it feels when you have to deal with someone who cancels or needs to change plans.
How much easier, less stressful, and just generally better is it to interact with someone who is proactively flexible? The person who apologizes gracefully, gives a brief reason, and immediately offers 2 or 3 specific alternatives. Compare that feeling to dealing with someone who just cancels, maybe vaguely, and pushes the entire burden of rescheduling back onto you. Use the tools and awareness we've talked about today to make sure you are always perceived as the former type of person. Master your arrangements, and in a way, you master your network, your collaborations, and ultimately your reputation.